Okay, recording in progress. We are coming at you live, albeit pre-recorded, but with no edits here again for the third installment of No Risk, No Reward podcast, videocast, call it whatever you want, where I'm trying to talk to people that will inspire and encourage you and maybe lift you up and impart some great advice to you. And tonight, I'm very happy to be joined by none other than Joseph Arthur. Joseph is a musician, a singer-songwriter, an artist, a painter, and a former colleague of mine at a live radio broadcasting station known as TNT, Today's News Talk, and he's very kindly agreed to hop on and chew the fat with me tonight. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I
Uh,
appreciate it. Hopefully, I
oh,
can deliver some inspiration and some
I,
insight.
I
Let's
would be
try.
seriously disappointed and shocked if you couldn't. So please listen to what this man says, especially if you're in any way creative or you're a music fan or an art lover. This is about delving into creativity and the things that you love, exposing yourself more to the things that you love and less to the things that will drag you down in life. So I want to
Mm.
ask you, Joseph, just going back to start to give our listeners a little bit of a flavor about who you are and where you came from. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was the early years like for Mr. Joseph Arthur?
Akron, Ohio is where I was born and raised. The rubber city is what it was called, rubber capital of the world, big rubber industry. Um, and yeah, just sort of suburban existence. Um, Good place to grow up. Lots of kids in the neighborhood running around all day and night. And I think I got into music. My parents got a piano. It was primarily for my sister, who's older than me a few years. But then, just by virtue of the fact that I was there, I also partook in piano lessons and did not like them. I'm not that good at uh, technical things or sort of things that feel like school. So I resisted it. My first relationship with actually playing music wasn't a good one. I resented it actually, but you were kind of alluding to like what was the breakthrough of like how did you sort of open up that relationship? And what happened is my aunt gave me this sequential circuits analog keyboard that had a 6 track sequencer on it, which I figured out how to use. And so I started composing music. And what I tell everyone is if you can access your imagination, it's bridging the gap between sort of like technical proficiency and then accessing your imagination or becoming a writer of music. That's when the love affair really starts. So for me, it was all about writing stuff. I could start composing music. And once that happened, it just became this sort of magical place I found that is still where I exist today for most of my time trying to be creative. It's just that relationship with the imagination and creativity. You know, it's sort of tapping into a sense of purpose, I guess you could say.
So you started off then with piano or keyboard, and you were
Hmm.
formally taught with that, learning about music theory and keys and scales and all that. But then when you mixed it in with when you got the foundations down, you veered off the beaten path and you said, "Well, actually, I'm going to write a song now. I know some chords and I know how to write in the key of C or whatever." So that was your inroad into
Yeah, but
composition and
it wasn't
expression.
like proper songwriting. It was more like just instrumental weird stuff. My mom said it always sounds Chinese. Everything you write sounds Chinese. It was all like like it was just like strange instrumental music, and I was into like jazz fusion and stuff like that. I was into Jaco Pastorius and Miles Davis and Bitches Brew. I mean, that was like a little later on I started getting into that because then by being a fan of Kiss as well, I wanted to play the bass. So I got into the bass because of Gene Simmons, really. And then I started learning how to like slap and pop on it. And I started getting into fusion bass players. And so I became really technically proficient on the bass. And so then my music became sort of bass centric. And I wasn't singing. I didn't start singing until I was 21. So I didn't really start writing songs until about then. So for the longest time, I thought I was going to be a jazz fusion bass player, and I wound up in a Cleveland rock blues band called Frankie Starr and Chill Factor. I went to this Guitar Wars that was held in Cleveland in the Flats. 70 or so guitar players from Cleveland all competing, and I was 16 years old, and I was the only one that bass, and I made it all the way to like the final four. And the guy who I went up against at the end of the finals or whatever was Frankie Starr, who's a blues prodigy in Ohio. He still is. He still performs. He's amazing. And he beat me. But then his manager came up to me and said, "Hey, do you want a gig?" And so I became a professional musician that night. I started playing in Cleveland bars 5 nights a week. While I was still going to high school, I was making $50 a night, which is an astounding amount of money for like the late 80s. And I mean, I was rich basically. And we ended up opening up for Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, we were like a really good blues rock
Mhm.
band. I mean, Frankie Starr's a genius.
Mhm.
So it was just like a sort of a rocket ship straight away. I just landed into professional music situation, um, still very young. So
And
that was,
just listening to you there, I got this picture in my head that you said you were still at school, yet you were doing 5 nights a week gigging in these
yeah,
blues bars with some amazing musicians late
yeah.
at night, getting up for school the next day. Did you feel at that point that you were living a double life, not
Oh,
not
uh,
covertly, but it's like, okay, I've got the Joseph Arthur that goes to school and he has to go to class and he has to do what the teachers say, and then
yeah.
at night it's almost like Batman. Bruce Wayne turns into Batman, and you jump on with the guitar, the bass, or the piano, and you go out and you jam blues, and you get paid for it as well. That must have seemed like the
Yeah.
greatest thing ever.
It was nuts because also I could drink. I had a friend end up starting to drive me to all the gigs, and I would drink rum and cokes because it looked like Coke, Coca-Cola because
Yeah.
I was still a kid. But in these bars, you could get away with it, and I had a penchant for drinking and all that stuff. So I would be getting loaded, and I would get home around 3 in the morning and have to be up for school at like 7 a.m. And then I'm walking around the halls of high school, just like I was living an adult life, really. And yeah, it was like I was just an alien at that point. I was just like on another plane. And so I don't think it was totally positive or totally negative. It was somewhere in between. I almost didn't graduate high school because of it. But my senior year, they let me start to go to school for a half day. So I only had to go a half day when I was a senior. But unfortunately, it was the first part of the day. So I still had to get up super early. But so then I was like working the night shift. I would get home from school around noon and go to sleep, and I would sleep until like 7 p.m. and then I would get up for the gig. And then I would go to Cleveland, which is like 30, 40 minutes away too. So it was like, and we had a couple gigs in Akron, but it was bananas. It was a crazy way to live. And I finally, I could have kept that gig. I ended up getting mono. And then the doctor said, "You either have to drop out of high school or quit the band." And so I told Frankie I'm going to quit the band, and because I wanted to get my high school diploma, which it's a bit cooler story if I just dropped out of high school, I guess. But I
I was
wanted, it was
hoping
only had,
I was
you
hoping you
know,
were going to go down that route, but you've disappointed me terribly here, I'm
I
afraid
just,
to say.
yeah. And Frankie was like, "You can have your gig back after you graduate."
Mhm.
And I just realized like, well, I don't really want to be a bass player in a local band for the rest of my life. So I ended up quitting and joined another band and moved to Atlanta. And that was more of a funk rock band. And I was really attached, and this will get to maybe something that can inspire others in terms of how do you have a breakthrough artistically? Because I was coming from a place of ego with the bass. I had formed this identity of being this sort of like technically proficient bass player that could slap and pop and do all this wild stuff on it. And so I hinged my entire identity on that, but that was sort of coming more from the ego. But what ultimately gave me success in music or a record deal and years of touring around the world was really being more of a folk singer and writing really acoustic songs with simple chord structures and focusing more on lyrics and melody. And where somebody might be able to get some value from that is I had to let the ego die on that level where I had to put the bass down and kind of completely reinvent myself at a certain point. It happened in my sort of early 20s where I was like, this isn't working. Just like coming from this slap and pop bass hero place. It wasn't really my soul.
Mhm.
What I was into then was like REM, Bob Dylan, um, Nirvana, great songwriters, Leonard Cohen, Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, that kind of stuff was what was really resonating with me. And so I realized if I was going to write those type of songs, it wouldn't be with a slap and pop bass behind it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like,
I was going to ask you the question when you were doing the gigs, when you were still 16, 17 years of age and you were
mhm,
doing the school thing, your brain must have been thinking, okay, maybe I have a shot at doing this professionally. Maybe I could make a living doing this. Maybe I could be a successful musician, because I don't think anyone with a love of music that picks up an instrument and does attempt some form of composition. Some people really take to it well, other people just do it for fun. But I think the thought crosses every musician's mind, or everyone with a love of music. My dream would be to be on a stage, to have a recording contract, to do this for a living, to support myself doing what I love, and to share my creations with other people. So, as you were going through that club experience and school experience, and you did say you put it in the balances when it came to making a decision. Okay, I want to finish my high school diploma and then maybe look at my options again after that. Did the drive to want to do this, maybe for a living, or I don't mean it for a living and okay, I can make money from this and I can be wealthy from this. I mean just to express yourself, doing what you love and paying the bills is a secondary thing. Did that come more to the forefront of your mind as you were finishing high school and you were accessing, okay, I don't want to be a slap bassist, I'm more interested in the Dylan side of things, to be able to sing, because you went from piano to bass, and then obviously from bass more maybe towards acoustic guitar and vocals. So it was
mhm.
a process maybe that you were going through, finding out what you didn't want to do to end up to the place that you did want to do it.
100%. And it was always like I wasn't bashful about that dream at all. Like that was the only plan I had. At the point where I like had that breakthrough musically, which led to success, I had no options. And I was no longer making 50 bucks a night. And I was in my, early mid 20s, and I was working minimum wage at a guitar shop, and I was cooking at a restaurant, and I was a door guy at a club. I mean, I was just doing whatever job I could to survive, and I had no hope. And I wasn't garnering that early success came like a flood very easily, and that had stopped. Like the band I went there with, we didn't really catch fire. I put out a solo project that didn't really catch fire, didn't really catch on. And so it was through that it was a lot of fear and a lot of like anxiety and a lot of like nowhere to go. What am I going to do? This is looking bleak, you know? And in those days too, when you were in your sort of approaching mid 20s, I mean, that sounds insanely young to me now, and it is insanely young. But then the sort of narrative was by 27, if you hadn't made it, forget it. You're not going to make it. So the clock was ticking too. And I just started, I stopped playing live and I just started recording songs. I just started writing songs on the acoustic guitar, and I made tapes, cassette tapes of like 10 songs. I sent them to a bunch of record labels, sent them to a couple friends. Always get back, sorry, we don't accept unsolicited material, return to sender, or couple rejection letters, we're not interested, like thing. And then I was also at that point in rooms of recovery, and trying to be sober and all that, sober up because of my early years. I was like, it got out of hand.
So,
To put it
say,
mildly.
so
But
say,
in that room of recovery, I gave one of my cassettes to a friend of mine named I could say his name, Michael K.
Mhm.
And he had no music industry connection that I knew of. This was just, in those days, there was no internet either. So for you to put your music out there, you just basically handed a friend a cassette. That's how you distributed your music. Otherwise, you had no chance of getting discovered or in any way, really. And like you'd had to have connections or garner some kind of local following. But that guy ended up giving it to a guy who worked at a record company in Atlanta, and then that guy sent it to a guy in New York, and then that guy, Harvey Schwartz, met with Peter Gabriel and said, "Hey, I got this interesting cassette." Or he was playing Peter like five acid jazz CDs for his label on Real World, and then Peter wasn't interested in any of them. And then he said, "Well, and Peter was like, I gotta go." He had to catch a plane back to the UK. And then Harvey was like, I did get this interesting cassette from this kid. You want to hear it? He goes, let me hear a song. He heard one song. He's like, let me hear one more song. He heard another song. He's like, can I take that cassette with me? And he took it. He listened to it on the plane. And when he got off the plane, he called me up and offered me a record deal.
take me to that point. The You're sitting at mid-20s, scratching your head,
Dude, I
going,
was lost, man. I like, and that was like a Hail Mary.
and it wasn't even that you planned to get it into his hands. And dare I
Not at all,
say,
dude. No, that was
if you hadn't had the problems that you had at the time and found yourself in some form of rehabilitation, then you wouldn't have made contact with the person that ultimately set forward that chain of
I
events
think
that got
about that
that
all the
tape into
time.
that
I
hands
think
of
about
yours.
that all the time in terms of alcoholism. I wouldn't even be alive because my mom met my dad at a bar randomly, and my mom's roommate was an alcoholic, and my dad had a penchant for drinking as well. So they only met as a result of alcohol. Like, if you think about it's sort of funny. It's interesting to think about those kind of things. But so
Well,
even life itself for me, Rick,
do
wouldn't
you
happen
find
without
do you
alcohol.
find as well, right, in your mid-20s, because I think the thing that stops a lot of people from really going hard after their dreams is
Yeah.
either fear of failure or people's perception that you give it your best and you just flunk, you don't make it. And there's a lot of people that don't make it despite having great talent, despite having going at it with every fiber of their being. And when you get the mid-20s as well, maybe this mindset kicks in. You look around and you look at people that are normal, doing normal jobs. They're not out, they're just living regular lives, but they're getting there. They have a roof over their head, and maybe they've got married, and maybe they've got kids, and they've got a house, and they've got a steady job, and there's no stress in their life. And that's not a life particularly that I ever wanted to live either. But it does have a certain attraction when you're at rock bottom, or you're about to, take a
Dude, it
place on
looks
Skid Row.
Bro,
All
when
of a
you're at
sudden,
rock bottom, it looks like Mecca. They look like the ones that are tuned into the reality.
yeah.
I mean, and there's something to be said for that. But I mean, in terms of like going for your dreams, it's gonna be hard not to get spiritual with this one
Yeah.
because to me, it's and the reason I went through that belabored story of the bass versus the acoustic guitar was because it points to a thing, the ultimate work that we all have to do, which is come into presence and sort of observe our ego or observe our mind, because we're interesting beings in that we are driven by the ego, which is always misleading us. And so to overcome the ego is sort of the work of finding that purpose, which is divinely inspired.
Mhm.
And then you sort of connect with that power and that source. And like what Neville Goddard always talks about is God is the human imagination. But I think God is really only the human imagination when it's unencumbered by the ego, when it's unencumbered by anger and fear and demonic principalities.
Mhm.
Because the human imagination is a nightmare machine if it's connected to the demonic realm.
Mhm.
So I think the key to facilitating your dreams coming true is to live as much just life as possible and practice, like what it says in the Bible, seek first the Father and all else will be added
Mhm.
on. I mean, I wasn't doing that back then. I was doing it unconsciously, but as you get older, I feel like you have to start working towards that kind of stuff more consciously, or maybe it's even as a result of the world that we live in, this constant stream of distracting information coming at us like a flood every single day.
Mhm.
You have to kind of divorce yourself from that, and you could say seek first the Father if you're Christian, or if that bugs you, you can call it presence and meditation, and it amounts to the same thing. It's coming into the source energy and aligning with source energy and asking for your purpose to be given to you, and sort of asking for wisdom, and then imagining the life that you want. This sounds like manifestation talk, but it's a blend of that, and then you sort of work towards your dream, but you're not doing it from a place of fear or lack. You're doing it from a place of faith.
Yeah.
And if you can get into that space, then I don't really think you can fail. When you say like there's countless people that have given it their all that haven't really made it could be a result of them not getting out of their own way, or them holding on to resentment, or them still listening to the ego and not being able to discern the fact. I mean, it's complicated business being a human being,
Yeah.
because we have these two, we definitely really have like a devil and an angel on our shoulders all the time. If you're paying attention to the devil all the time, he's going to lead you down the wrong track. The devil was telling me, dude, you need to slap and pop. You need to become impressive with the bass. But what really was going to bring me success was taking all that away and stripping it all back down and focusing on lyrics and melody, you
Mm.
know?
Uh, Interesting listening to your take on that. I'm fully behind what you've said. I also believe there are just certain stories where I define it as divine intervention, because the thing that you ended up getting, the miracle or the breakthrough that you ended up getting, you didn't plan for it, you didn't engineer it, is what I'm trying to say. And through a completely unrelated series of events, you're sitting there in this position in your mid 20s, assessing life and thinking to yourself, this could appear like Mecca, the normal life, because you've tried and you're at a certain point, you're not getting any further forward. So you're always hoping for a miracle. That's why you make the tapes. And I think you mentioned work, you got to put in the hours, you got to put in the work, you got to put yourself out there, because if you're not putting yourself out there, if you hadn't made that tape, you wouldn't have connected the way that you did and got your first proper breakthrough through Peter Gabriel. So take me back to that. You said you got a phone call, right? So you said it's pre-internet days. Somehow the phone rang. Was it him or a representative of him? And if it
No, he
wasn't,
called me
did you
directly.
think it was a joke or a wind up? Or sometimes things can be seem to be too good to be true. So if some dude came on the phone to me tonight and said, "Hi, it's whoever, somebody that I admire greatly. I heard your tape and I want to sign you to a record label." Was there an element of you in a little bit of disbelief or shock?
Yeah, but I worked at a local guitar shop, and sort of people knew me. And the guy who sent it to the New York guy called me up a few days before that call and said, "Hey, you're going to get a call and it's going to blow your mind." Um, so I was pre-prepared for it to a degree, but he wouldn't tell me who. And I couldn't fathom it was Peter Gabriel. But Peter Gabriel was like the first single. It's like Shock the Monkey was the first 45 I ever bought. So it's interesting the way these things work. Like the the if you believe in the power of manifestation, like the it's just interesting. So there was some setup to when I did, and when I didn't take the call, it was just an answering machine message, which I listened to like 400 times. It's just like just Peter saying, "Hey, I got your tape. And I think you write great songs, and we're interested in signing you." I mean, I didn't even know he had a record label. So that was so far out of the bounds of what I could have conceived of. And I wouldn't have dreamed of being on a label that was a world music label that was run by Peter Gabriel. I mean, it just was beyond. I was like thinking I would try to get on an indie, like a local Atlanta indie label. If I would have been able to get on that, I would have been like over the moon. You know, like I wasn't even shooting that high. You
Man,
know,
that's
I just
incredible.
wanted to be able, yeah, I just wanted to sort of, yeah, it's interesting. And so I ended up going to New York and auditioning for him, and then he brought Lou Reed to that first audition, and so the fact that Lou Reed came with his DAT recorder to record my show was just, I found out Lou was going to be there. It was at the Fez in New York. And once somebody said, "Hey, Lou Reed is coming with him," I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is insane. This is nuts. I had just started playing acoustic guitar like a year. Like I wasn't really a singer-songwriter. I was a bass hero, bass player, aping as a singer-songwriter at that point. These were like my first 10 songs I wrote as this singer-songwriter guy, and then so I went to the bathroom and I got on my knees and I prayed. And I just was like, please let me get through this, basically. And I played my set and then I got off stage and I went right up to Lou and Lou was like, I like that song called King of Hide and Seek. And I didn't have a song called King of Hide and Seek, but I had a song that had King of Hide and Seek in the lyrics. And the King of Hide and Seek was a much better title as it turns out. But
Good grief. Good grief. Do you know,
and
this
then we
is
went out, and then we went out to dinner, and I was sitting between Lou and Peter, and Dolly Parton was in the booth right next to us. And there was no one else in the restaurant. And those guys were more starstruck by Dolly Parton than Dolly Parton was starstruck by them. And then Peter said, "Oh yeah, I asked her originally to sing on Don't Give Up with Me," which is a pretty interesting thing if you think about it.
You see that you mentioned Lou Reed. This is completely unconnected, or maybe it's not. But last night I sat up very, very late and I was looking at some of your solo stuff. And then, you go on YouTube and the algorithm suggests this. And then I went on to your stuff with Peter Buck. And then there was various TV shows that you played live. And one of the things that I did want to talk to you about was there was a video that I watched late, late, late last night. And it was from the David Letterman show, I think in
Hmm.
1994. And you played Wild Side, Take a Walk on the Wild Side. You were playing piano on it, you were singing. And Peter Buck and Mike Mills, I believe, from REM, where you're accompanying you on
Hmm.
guitar and bass. And when you mentioned Lou Reed there, it was brought to, that audition gig via Peter Gabriel in New York City. Just
Hmm.
thinking about that also add another layer to it. Fast forward time a little bit further still, and there you are on something as big as the David Letterman show, playing a Lou Reed song with REM, playing along with you, two members of it, and you were a fan
Yeah,
of theirs as
it's
well from your early musical days.
Yeah, they were my favorite band for a long time, dude. I mean, they're still one of my favorite bands. It's crazy. That's why I think it's kind of interesting to talk about the manifestation aspect of it because it's like how much sort of does your imagination dance with those sort of figures, and then to sort of have then to be in the place of being in their world or in their sphere, like with Lou. And then obviously like with Peter and Mike in that situation, that was the night that David Letterman announced his retirement as well from broadcasting or from his show.
Was that
Um,
94? If I got the date right,
no, you got the year wrong on that because that
was
was
it
after Lou
04?
had passed. It must have been, yeah, I don't
04.
know.
I think there was a
Um,
four in the, it was
it
either 94,
it probably
2004,
it would probably be 2014 because it was after Lou passed that
2014. Maybe that
that
was
we
it.
made that record. So, um, yeah, I mean that was a wild situation, obviously. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. It's wild to go through stuff like that, and then you know watch it go away and watch it come back again and go through all the sort of, I mean, because to me every day is still a challenge and getting out of my own way. And if I could do anything that what really excites me at this point in my life is to try to help other people get out of their own way,
Mhm.
and find some sort of creative fulfillment in their life. That's sort of um I mean, I love music still. I mean, I have a solo record getting ready to come out. I have a new record with Peter Buck and Rich Robinson and Barrett Martin coming out called Silverlights. We're a new band. We put out a single. Yeah, I got lots of music coming out that, and I feel like it's not lacking for anything. But it's weird because now I feel motivated in an entirely different direction,
Mhm.
which is more like I guess spiritual in nature,
Mhm.
or something like I feel like a calling to help other people, yeah, fulfill their lives creatively and just live a fulfilling life. I don't know why I'm called in that direction, but I am, and
And you're going for it.
it's almost like the voices come in and say, "Well, who are you to give advice? And is your life perfect?" And it's like, no, but I have a perspective, and I do. This world is a spiritual battlefield, and we're battling ourselves every day to like live a life of our dreams. And if you look around, I don't think anyone has an easy life, you know.
And as well as that, just before I started recording this with you tonight, every second Wednesday, there's a group of guys come down here to my house, people that I've known for a long, long time. We're all in our early 50s now. Well, there's three of us are in our 50s and a young lad, a young man in his mid 30s. We sit down and we talk about life and we try and encourage each other. And I think one of the things that we do is we learn from each other's mistakes and we trust each other enough to say, look, if I take advice from you, I know it's coming from a good place. I know it's born from a lot of experience. So that voice in your head, even that's saying, oh, who you to lecture people on sobriety or how you to lecture people on how to do this, you've messed up here. That's the devil on your shoulder telling you that
Exactly.
you shouldn't be doing it. But in
Right.
reality, those mistakes that you made, even the testimony is, well, if I hadn't ended up in that place in the first place, maybe that tape would never have got there and it wouldn't have been sitting with Lou Reed and Dolly Parton behind me and on the Letterman show. I'm playing with REM and now I'm making records with him and Rich Robinson and Barrett Martin and on it goes. If you listen to that devil, you'll just stay in your room and you'll keep your head down and your shoulders hunched and you won't open your mouth
Right.
or play that guitar. But I think, that's the purpose of the devil. He's a liar. And the father of all lies, and anything that he whispers in your ear, the opposite is actually going to be the truth.
That's why every day it's like, today I started off, I go to this place, this a cold plunge place, what's it? Pulse electric PEMF machine, biocharger, red light therapy, cold plunge, infrared sauna. And I start the day there doing breath work, and it's basically an excuse to meditate or seek presence, because you have to actively seek the opposing voice of the demonic principalities. And if you that's why that phrase, seek first the Father and all else will be added on, I think it resonates so well, because the devil right away, when you first wake up, will start giving you messages of fear and anxiety and regret, and try to like ping pong you from between the past and the future and make sure you don't ever arrive at the moment. You have to be able to get to a place of quiet and silence and really just try to be present and to sort of align yourself with purpose. And so that's really important. And so I start every day doing that. Then I went and did a Bikram yoga class and stuff like that. That really keeps me on track. Out here in Arizona, I do hikes. I just did Camelback Mountain yesterday,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. I think is really important, is to sort of know that working towards your purpose and your dream and your vision isn't about just getting into the studio and grinding it out straight away. It's getting into the right space and then seeking direction from a deeper place within you as to what you should be working on and where you should put your energy.
Tell me this, rewinding just a little bit back to the breakthrough, as it were, when you went to New York, you had that audition, you got signed. When you were given the record deal, or you got the record deal, however you want to phrase that, and you started to record, and then that led on to touring. I'm sure one thing led on to another. You know, the venues got bigger, your name spread around a little bit more. You were able to immerse yourself more fully in that lifestyle. It wasn't going to be a choice anymore between school and music. Now you had this path that you were following on music. Did you find it what you expected it to be? Was it something completely different to what you perceived that it might be? When you were on the way up, did you think you were going to keep going up, up, up forever? Was there a plateau and a dip and then up and down like a roller coaster? What was that journey like for you? Was it a, straight path, a winding path? Was it a big dipper? What was it?
All over the place. I mean, yeah, all over the place. It was always it's an interesting one because it does re-engage the ego, and then you always want more, and you always take for granted what you have going on. I mean, it's one of these things where and then you're sort of grappling with a fractured and fragmented self, that, like, the world is like, yeah, it's hard to sort of put into like eloquent words in a podcast format. That's so it's almost like you got to write a book about it, because it goes so far all over the map, and you think of things you could have done differently. And in my case, it I mean, I sustained a career in music for 25 years or something like that. Like, I mean, 24 years, making a livelihood with that. And then it sort of dramatically went away during the sort of COVID era,
Mm-hmm.
from the fact that I became outspoken in that way, that what you weren't really allowed to be outspoken. Um and that was interesting, and that was a different level of sort of ego decimation that really I needed, and has
A
helped me a
humbling,
lot.
like a humbling almost.
A humbling, yeah. And I mean, I felt dissatisfied at that point in my life anyway. I wasn't, I was like sort of working towards trying to rebuild my career. There was, it's hard to sustain a career um at a level of sort of at certain levels. I mean, I never really had huge breakthrough success, so I had certain songs that would get big, and I would tour, and I would make these different bands with people, and it was fun and interesting and amazing, and it was a really sort of a great situation to be in, really. But it's one of these things where it's competitive, and the way the world works is you're supposed to be bigger, and you got to get more comfortable, and more and more and more. And you can get on that. And I think that's a destructive path.
So
Um,
almost the same way, I suppose you would say that if you were struggling with drinking in your mid-20s, that it led you to a place of a dark place and a place of despair, but you got light and you got breakthrough in that dark place of despair. Maybe the humbling process at a certain point of your career caused you to step back, recalibrate, maybe dig into other things a little bit more, and then the connections that you'd made back in the day when you were out touring with the bands that you loved. And I'd love to talk to you more about it, but I don't want to focus on this today or tonight anyway. But this Silverlights project, for example, I was looking at the background of that. I've seen a few interviews about that one, and that's been on in the making now for quite some time. But now in November, I think it's coming out 15th of November is the release date that it'll be released. There's a single out there that people can listen to in Spotify, and I'll put the links under this as well. It's
yeah.
now that it's actually coming to light, despite the fact that you've been tinkering with it or laboring on it for many years now. But again, timing. The timing is, this is the time for this to come to pass, and maybe this is a different season that you're going to move into. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it, yeah, it's talking about that, like that sort of humbling thing. It's just like this concept. I haven't written about it, but I wrote the let's see, where is it? All of life is a movement towards perfection, you know. So if you're going through hardships, there's seasons for everything, right?
Hmm.
So I do believe that we're being guided towards the ultimate fulfillment of our souls if we can only stay on course and we don't allow our struggles to sort of overtake us, right? So, in terms of being humbled in recent years, it's led me towards the sort of um, concepts I've been speaking about today, and just that sort of focus of wanting to seek presence and be present and sort of dissolve the ego or see through the ego for what it is, which has led to, I would say, something like peace, you know, which that's amazing. You know, so there's no amount of gold records that would compete with having a little sense of peace. You know, like John Lennon said, I'll give you everything I got for a little peace of mind.
Hmm.
And peace comes in seeking presence. Um, and I'll talk about, but let's see, there's this can I read you a little poem I wrote?
Of course you can.
Life is a journey, the most peculiar way home, all the ups and downs and weaknesses we roam, to elevate our mind and set perceptions free, to once again believe in who we're supposed to be. The devil takes us down many wrong turn lanes, scattering our souls, our hearts, and then our brains, until we get so lost we know no more the way, we don't know what to do or even what to say. We've got a spiritual flu, a sickness cold and gray. The light that's in our eyes has all but gone away, but we can get it back if we only pray, asking for his guidance from presence deep within, seeking first the Father and seeking him again, allowing for his light to touch our hearts again, and knowing we are spirit beyond our flesh and skin, asking for forgiveness, choosing to repent. We can shift momentum back to dreams now heaven sent, tapping into purpose, coming clear from him. Our lives begin to flower divinity, the stem. We become a light again and set the others free, free in our reflection of who we all can be. The devil losing grasp, our souls no longer trapped, our energy evolving, filled up, and not so sapped. Forgiveness in the shadows for ourselves and everyone, our spirits charged and vibrant and full of dreams to come.
Beautiful. Do you put that
Kind of like
stuff?
Dr. Seuss for adults, right?
Well, let me ask you a question on the poetry front, right? Because obviously, you said earlier on about focusing on lyrics and focusing on Dylan-esque type,
Melody.
stripped down
Yeah.
melody, but those lyrics stand alone, or those words stand alone in that poem that you'd put together. Do I've heard you reciting a lot of poetry. By the way, all the links will be in the description box underneath this here. But you've got a YouTube channel. It's called Joseph Arthur Official. So if you search on YouTube under Joseph Arthur Official, or a website, josepharthur.com. But on the YouTube channel in particular, you walk around and you're up a mountain, or you're sitting there at the jacuzzi and you're reading off you're talking, and you've got this like deep lilting drawl delivery when it comes to your spoken word, that's nothing at all to me like you're singing. Okay, so
Hmm.
I find that interesting. Do you look at poetry as a standalone? And you could say it's interchangeable, but do you look at it as a standalone thing that you practice the writing of poetry when you're thinking, I don't need to put a melody to this. I don't want to write a chorus here. I'm just speaking what I think, and when I read it out, it's just one continuous stream. Do you how would you say, I don't know, I want to say practice poetry, but do you create
Yeah,
as much
I
of that
write
as you do with music or painting, for example?
more. More. I mean, I write every morning as well. That's part of the morning routine. I try to get up really early in the morning and I write first thing, usually. I'm not perfect about that, but I try to. Um, and because the unconscious has more a clear connection in the morning, real early morning. You can write stuff like that very easily. Whereas in the midday, after you've been bombarded with information and all that, it's really hard to sort of tap into that source, I feel. So with something like that, if I write a rhyming poem like that one, if I decide to rhyme, then that can easily turn into a song. But a lot of times I'll write sort of stream of consciousness poetry
Yeah.
that doesn't attempt to rhyme, and then I'll usually never try to make a song out of something like that. But if it's rhymes like that one, I could see making a song out of.
Do you put them together though? And I mean, like you've got them on your phone and you write them down on pieces of paper, maybe put them on your computer. Have you ever put together a collection as a like a
Yeah.
poetry collection? And if
hmm
so, have you not toured it, but have you tried doing spoken word or gigs that are just spoken word or talking about your experiences?
Yeah, I put out a few different poetry books. One, Notes from the Road back in the early 2000s, and then I Miss the Zoo was another collection of poetry I put out. And yeah, I definitely have ambitions towards writing, but it's this kind of sort of along the lines of what we're talking about here. It's like sort of writing, but towards I'm drawn towards people like Wayne Dyer or Eckhart Tolle or Neville Goddard or people that write about ways to help humans get
Yeah.
out of their own way. I'm really immersing in that, and I love that kind of stuff. And I want to write along those lines, but more maybe geared towards helping people become creatively free because I have a sort of history of being creatively free. So it sort of it makes sense in a way. But the thing is that being creatively free is a lot like just being free, you know, because it really comes down to forgiveness is a huge one. If people have writer's block or they're sort of feel stagnant or stuck in life, they probably are harboring some kind of resentment somewhere. And so a big part of the practice I do is called Ho'oponopono, which I'm working on a song right now actually with Melanie Gabriel, Peter Gabriel's daughter's been singing with me on tour, and she sang with her husband as well. We recorded at her house this Ho'oponopono song I'm working on actually as we speak.
Mhm.
And it's I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And the idea is you say those words, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and you sort of send that out to anyone you might have a resentment against, and you sort of repeat that mantra. There's a lot of YouTube videos about Ho'oponopono too, which is a great one. And I just think forgiveness is such a huge key towards unleashing yourself creatively. Because if the ego, what we want to do is quiet the ego down, and the ego loves conflict. That's why if we look at this world, people say the world is ruled by the devil, but the world is engaged in outrage. We've talked about this, the outrage culture and this culture of division that we're in. I don't think that's by accident. This is keeping us away from our sort of primary source, because if we are judging and condemning each other and we're angry at each other, then you can't really be creatively free and in those energies at the same time. You know, you can only serve one master. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you talk about as well freedom. You've mentioned freedom. You've talked about peace. You know, all the money in the world or the gold records in the world can't buy that as well. And you talked about, if resentment or carrying around a grudge. And in my life,
hmm
when I used to have, a chip on each shoulder, it was
Yeah,
very
me
well
too,
balanced.
bro.
And
Me too,
I
dude.
found after listening, after thinking or going to a quiet place or taking myself away from every distraction, thinking who is this hurting? And the answer was always me, because
It's
the
you.
people that you have a beef with or the people that you're incensed with, they don't feel it. They don't know it. They're off doing their own thing, but you're seething and you're stewing, and you're this black cloud perpetually hangs over the top of your head. And when you do get to that point, you just say, listen, it is what it is. What has happened has happened. It's happened for a reason. I'm just letting it go. Okay. I'm not harboring any grudges. What has been has been. And again, if you can look at it, that maybe it all happened for a reason. If you do read the Bible and you do study the Bible, the Bible says that everything, all things good happen for a reason to those that love the Lord, or to love God, whatever way you want to interpret that. And I also believe that what the devil can mean for good or evil in some cases, God can turn it around for good. And that includes being betrayed.
He always
That includes
does.
being backstabbed. That includes being dropped by all your so called friends. Maybe it's a pruning. that's happening, or a sifting that's going on to actually purify you like gold. And,
It's
that's not a bad
100%
thing.
what it is. That is exactly what it is. And so also like if you consider like what Jesus said about, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, or our battle is with principalities,
Yeah.
not with flesh and blood.
Yeah.
Principalities are operating through all of us. You got them. I got them. You got them. We all
Hmm.
got them. And it's like they're operating from those people that so-called betrayed you too. So you can love your enemy, as Jesus put it, because it wasn't really them that did whatever they did to you. It was principalities operating through you. And where Ho'oponopono is so powerful is you are in fact saying, I love you for helping me evolve in my soul journey, even if that help, which it always usually is, comes from some sort of dark, painful event. I love you. I'm sorry that I cast you from a higher spiritual perspective as this person that would have to come at me with betrayal to help me on my soul's evolution. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me for doing that, and thank you. And then when you do that, it's very powerful because you're taking full accountability and full responsibility for everything in your field of consciousness. And to put it in movie terms, it's like you're Neo in the Matrix, and all those bullets of rage are flying at you, and they just don't hit you. It's really powerful stuff, and it really works. And it's not, you don't have to be some guru on the hill to figure it out. It's real basic. Is it easy? It's not easy, but it could not be more simple if it tried. It's so simple, and it's available to all of us. And yeah, I can frame everything in a Christian context. I identify myself that way, but it's also not necessary if that's not your
Yeah.
religion or your spiritual belief. You can just look at it as I think you can just look at it in terms of presence
Hmm.
and of wanting to formulate that relationship with the present moment awareness, as opposed to being in your head thinking about the past and the future, which ultimately leads to nowhere.
I think one other thing as well that I've learned from experience is if you're finding it difficult to forgive someone for doing something heinous on you, or for saying terrible things about you, or for leaving you high and dry at a particularly crucial point in your life, when I reflected on that in terms of my life, the chances are high, extremely high, that I've also treated other people in exactly the same way.
Are you?
We have this
Yeah,
almost selective memory. He said this about me. She did this about me. They left me stranded. They never reached out for help when I was at my lowest point. If you really step back and be brutally honest with yourself, I'm just talking about
yeah,
me personally. When I looked at the
me
mirror, I
too.
thought, man,
You're talking about me too.
you've done that to more people than people have done it to you. So when it comes to forgiving people, I'm as bad a perpetrator of the same acts as the people that I have a beef with. So it makes it a
That's
little bit
it.
easier to let it go.
That's it, man. It's like the why are you looking at the splinter in their eye when you have a
Yes.
log in your eye? Jesus was funny because it's like you don't really have a log in your eye, but it's a funny riff, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
you, dude, you have a log in your eye, bro. It's like, and it's true. I mean, and therein lies the other thing too, the inverse relationship with forgiveness. Do you need to be forgiven? Can you really honestly say you don't have nothing you need to be forgiven for? I know I can't. I need forgiveness. So if I'm going to facilitate forgiveness coming at me, I need to be a forgiving vessel. I need to be somebody that is forgiving as a practice. And that is really an avenue towards creative liberation, because then you are in a peaceful platform.
Mhm.
Then you can sit alone in a room, because to do great art and to do great creative work, it requires a lot of time alone, hanging out by yourself. And what does that amount to? That amounts to and with this day and age, like I saw Zuby put out a post where he said he thinks like we've maxed out sort of with artistic achievement. We're never gonna like better the greatest music from back in the day or the greatest art. And I thought, I don't like that. I don't agree with that, actually. I don't really agree with that. I think it is possible that we can still elevate where we've been musically and where we've been in all the forms, but That being said, this is a more challenging time because we're glued to these cells. This is literally like a cell.
Yeah.
Our devices are, they're called cells. You know, they have a bitten apple on them. It's pretty obvious. It's like biblical. The bitten apple
Yep.
is right on it. You know, it's crazy. So to get your place where your world is comfortable, where you're fine sitting in a room alone without staring at your phone or without running this way and that way, to where you can facilitate creative work requires all this spiritual heavy lifting. That's why for us to compete with artistic achievements in the past, we have to become spiritual warriors. There's no other way we're going to do it because we have a bigger battle to fight towards finding that place than they did back in the day. Back in the day, they had three channels on their TV and the shows were crap and there was tons of commercials. And they had, you know, we just stared at vinyls and like
Yeah.
you were bored. You got to be bored, and from bored and sprung like, let me pick up this guitar and sit here for hours on end writing songs.
Reading liner notes on double gatefold vinyls, finding out who the tour crew was for the
Right,
sound
you knew
engineer for
everything.
Metallica back in 1984. Fleming Rasmussen produced it in such and such a recording studio in Copenhagen. Yeah,
Right.
that was your only avenue to find out about the things that you love. You said about the phone as well, and there's a great quote I heard this week, and it said, back in the day when our phones had lines attached to them, the old dial-up phones that you would have had at home. When the phones had cords, then we were free. But when the
Yeah.
phones lost their cords, then we became slaves. And I think, I know we're watching this or we're communicating on an electronic device here, and people will most likely be watching this on an electronic device. But I think the message is, and I want to try and draw this to a close because I said I didn't want to go too far tonight because I want people to digest everything that's being said. And if you don't mind, or if you haven't found this traumatic, maybe when you do release that music in the middle of November, the Silverlites, I'll get a chat to you about the actual music itself, because I've been trying to look at the creative process in your journey rather than what you've actually been producing per se. So, yeah, on that basis, I want to hope and believe maybe somebody's listened to this tonight. They've been provoked, they've been inspired, they've been challenged maybe to look at where they're at and what they could be doing, and maybe cast aside some burdens that are holding them back in terms of unforgiveness. Because I'd be shocked if somebody isn't listening to this at the minute that they're shackled. They're shackled to things that are holding them back from having that peace and having that
We're all
creative freedom.
shackled daily until we do that's why it's daily work. It's like you wake up in the shackles, dude. The shackles are back on. It's like, okay, let me work on taking these shackles off again. But a lot of times I don't think people are even doing the work to take the shackles
Yeah.
off every day. And the shackles get easier and easier to take off, but they're there every day. The devil's like, yeah, I got you again.
Is it Christmas? A Christmas Carol? The Christmas thing where the Jacob Marley's ghost comes back to haunt Scrooge, and the first thing he hears is this chain, this heavy chain rattling, and when he sees the ghost of Jacob Marley, he's just completely bound up in these chains that he had forged during his life. He never cast off the shackles; they became big. The chain got bigger and bigger till it was like a battleship anchor chain cast around his neck. And I think if we don't put time in liberating ourselves on a daily basis, it's not even a case of the shackles stay on, but maybe more shackles are added daily, and
Or
before you know it, you're like Houdini.
even worse than that, the shackles become who you are. You become the shackles. You become, you identify with anger as your personality. You identify with judgment and all this nonsense as your personality and as who you are. And it's not who you are. It's just not. It's not for us to judge. We weren't really supposed to have the knowledge of good and evil, which leads to judgment and condemnation. That's the point of that story. We're not supposed to be out here judging each other and condemning each other.
Yeah.
That ain't the mission.
Be
It
salt
doesn't mean it
and light.
doesn't mean you don't like resist evil in your way, or that you don't, or you turn a blind eye and you become a hippie and just like all you need is love. But it's true that all you need is love. And then when you bring that love and that light, then you are actually attacking darkness.
Mhm.
You can't really defeat darkness by bringing more darkness. You defeat darkness by bringing light,
Mhm.
you know.
And on a daily basis, not sporadically, I would hope. Listen, I'm gonna wrap
But
this
if
up
you
now.
but if you do get stuck with it, then forgive yourself and start again from where you are. Start from where you are. Don't be like, well, I didn't do it again, because that's another demon right there. Like, ah, I don't do it. I'm not consistent. But then just get consistent.
Yeah, get
Anyway,
consistent. Drop the sporadic, get consistent, and don't listen to the devil on your shoulder. Listen, it's been a blast talking with you.
thanks,
There was
Rick.
nothing solid laid out, but I did want to try. I want to hope people leave this conversation in a better condition than when they arrived, and they've been inspired and encouraged to make some changes for the better in their lives.
And Silverlights, the new single "Dark and Magic Sky" comes out tomorrow. I don't know when this is airing, but November 1st, I think. Yeah, midnight of Halloween. And
Okay.
then I have a single called "Thank You Is My Mantra." Thank you is my mantra. That comes out, yeah, right around Thanksgiving, because
And you
it's
have another
thank
one
you.
that you've just
It's
released
my
called One Life. I
Yeah,
think
and
that's a new
One
song as
Life
well.
just came out. Yeah, the video for that just came out this week, or a couple days ago. I think
Right.
on
So
Sunday.
what I'm going to do is, for anyone listening, check out Joseph's YouTube channel. First and foremost, he puts a lot of great stream of consciousness videos up there. He's quite prolific on there. That's Joseph Arthur Official on YouTube. His website is josepharthur.com. Spotify, you can get on there. Look out for Silverlites, Silverlites. That is, the album is coming out on the 15th of November, I believe. Another single will be out. I'll probably upload this within the next day or two. And like I said, I just wanted to look at you, Joseph Arthur, the man, and your background here tonight. Maybe just on a purely musical level, maybe sometime in November before Christmas anyway, we could talk again. You can tell me a little bit more about the creative process behind the Silverlights, really how you guys work together, working solo versus working in a band environment. And of course, I wish you every success with the new record. So, Mr. Arthur, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me on. Godspeed to you, my friend. And
Likewise.
let's do it again. Let's do it again soon.
We'll stay in touch. Thank you very much. Listen, subscribe, hit the notification button, all that jazz, and I'll be back shortly with more inspiring people to talk to here on No Risk, No Reward. Thank you for listening.